Hello. I hope we're recording now. Yes. So, news today coming out at the moment is that Facebook are no longer going to use fact checkers. And I know they're going to still use something. They're going to say it's more like community notes. So it's user inputted as opposed to being automated from professional fact checking sites. And the reason he's doing this is because Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg has said that fact checkers are corrupt, that they're not accurate, they're left-leaning, and they've been getting it wrong for a while now. So that's interesting. A lot of people think that's just him sucking up to Donald Trump. I've heard that. Now, it's not. I'll just give that a little preview, but I'll just try to explain why. So, essentially, fact checkers have been around since before Facebook, and we're not arguing in any way that fact checkers that existed before Facebook were corrupt, before Facebook started paying them. In fact, Facebook only started paying them in 2016. So we're only really talking about the period 2016 to now, or 2016 to 2024 really. I suppose 2025, we're technically in 2025 now, and that's the period that we're talking about them being corrupt. And not even necessarily the whole time, not even necessarily all of them. But we don't know which ones are corrupt and which ones are not. We're just saying, as a general group, Facebook considers it too risky to have them as a group. Now, obviously he's making no comment on the group that existed beforehand, or even ones that still exist that he pays, such as Snopes, that existed before 2016. So these Snopes, for example, I used, and I considered to be quite good. I didn't analyse them 100%, but they were fine, from what I could tell, and I still believe they're fine. But well, one example of why you needed to have fact checking, and I'll give one example that I'm pretty sure was on Snopes. So, somebody shared this in my feed in Facebook a number of years ago, and it was shared quite extensively. A number of people shared it, and it said that if you were held at gunpoint at an ATM, all you had to do to call police was to enter your PIN in reverse. Now that wasn't true, but it was in a reputable newspaper. In fact, a number of reputable newspapers who believed it to be true. And so if you just went to the newspaper, you just went to Google, you would think it was true. But the fact-checking sites proved that it wasn't true. And in that situation, it was very dangerous because a lot of people would believe it to be true. And I hope I don't need to say why that's dangerous. Because if you can just imagine you're held up at gunpoint, you've got your PIN, let's say it was 1234. I'm just going to use a stupid PIN. And so you're held at gunpoint, you're saying, oh, I'll give you the money. So you put it in as 4321, the exact reverse. And police would come. And you think, okay, they know what kind of thing it is, they'll ping to their address from the ATM, they'll come and maybe they'll be there in 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. So then all you have to do is to delay the would-be robbers and say, oh no, the PIN's not working. And hopefully they'd give you a bit of patience for 5 minutes or so while the police get there, and then you're fine. The problem is that obviously police wouldn't come because that doesn't exist. It's never existed in anywhere in the world. So people potentially, as you can probably imagine, might put in the wrong PIN number, antagonise the would-be criminals, and they might die. They might get killed as a result of that. Because they'd think that they were safe, they're probably acting as if police are going to come. Sort of, they think it's a silent alarm, they act as if it's a silent alarm, and then they just get killed. Now, I don't know if anybody actually did get killed from that one, but it was a sort of a dangerous situation. And the reason why it was published in reputable newspapers is because there was an actual plan to put this in place, but it just never happened. So some newspapers thought they did bad research, but they thought quite genuinely that, oh, it was going to be planned to put in place, and it must have. Now, I don't actually know why it didn't happen, but I guess I can see a number of problems with it. One being, what if you have a PIN number that's the same forwards as backwards? For example, what if it's 2002? 2002, backwards is also 2002. So without any checking software, that one wouldn't work. because everything would always be backwards, and so it'd either call police every time or else it'd never call police. So you'd have to ban a pin that's forwards and backwards. That creates a lot of extra software. And then let's say that you have a pin that's similar forwards to backwards. Let's say your pin is 1981, might be your birth year, and let's say you slip your finger, you get 1891 instead. Now, maybe because of where the pins are, it's more likely to be 1971 becomes 1791, but whatever, there's going to be circumstances where a little accident causes you to accidentally call police. And this is going to be a problem, so you're going to have all these different checks to make sure that you're not going to be accidentally calling police. Now, this wouldn't be such a problem if you had 8-digit pins like they have here in Australia, but in America they're all 4. So that becomes very problematic. And so they didn't say why they didn't implement it, but they just didn't. And so that's never happened. So you might say, well, it's irresponsible of the newspapers to report that when it was never actually enacted. And it is, and I agree that those newspaper journalists should be in a bit of trouble for that. But also, people should be checking. Because sure, it was in a newspaper, but if they did a little Google, they'd find out it wasn't true. And that's where the likes of Snopes were really handy, because I could just share a Snopes article and it had the actual factual details, you could look through them, and you could say, oh, this was meant to be implemented but never actually happened, don't do this, it's actually really dangerous. And so that's explained, that's good. And that was a good system in my opinion. Good system that we had these fact checkers that were optional to use. And most people I knew would use them. I knew some people that wouldn't check their facts, they just share things believing them to be true if they sounded true. But I was always check something, particularly if it sounded a bit dodgy. Sometimes some things I'd think were true weren't, but somebody else would probably pull me up. But that was a good system, at least I think it was. And so then what happened was that there were some people actually shared stuff, and I don't think it was that one, but it was other things that led to deaths, or at least were associated with deaths. Now, again, you have people die and then you sort of work out, well, what caused the deaths and so forth. We can certainly imagine a scenario where sharing the wrong information could lead to someone dying. But then who is responsible for it? Is the person that wrote the article responsible? Or is the person who believed that responsible? Or is the person who shared it responsible? At least one law court, and I believe it was 2, they thought that it was Facebook who were responsible. And they fined them for it. I believe it was around $100,000 each time. And Facebook were like, well, this is not fair. But then they were sort of scared, what happens if that keeps going? What happens if they keep being sued? It could become very expensive. They could probably afford a couple of times, and maybe 1 a year or 2 a year. And these were not large numbers. These were not large numbers of people dying. These were not large number of people suing. And these were certainly not large numbers of people successful in suing. But it did happen. They did succeed. Now, I would argue what Facebook should have done is gone to a court of appeal, said, hey, hang on, this is the wrong decision, and, I had tried to have it overturned and just keep going, because it's certainly not their fault. I don't see any scenario in which this is Facebook's fault, because Facebook shouldn't be expected to look through every single post and make sure that it's absolutely factual. But anyway, for whatever reason, they was considering, around 2012 or 2013, they started to consider that maybe they should start to have fact-checking and put it in there. Now, they knew that there were fact-checking services, but they didn't know how to convince their users this was a good way to go, because, of course, everybody was used to it being on their own head. If you wanted to share something that wasn't true, that's your right. If you want to say something that's not true, that's your right. It is a right. And if you want to believe something that's not true, that's your right too. And Facebook always believed that. But they were pressured by some irresponsible people, I think, really, who were just after money and who wanted to, not for any safety issues, they wanted to do this to make money. I mean, they said it was for safety reasons. I don't agree with that. I think this wasn't about safety, this was about greed. And anyway, so they weren't really sure how to implement it because they knew the users wouldn't accept it. But what changed this was in 2016, Donald Trump was running for president. And as part of his presidency campaign, he accused people who disagreed with him or who said he was wrong of being fake news. So Facebook went, if we act like we're supporting Donald Trump, we can say that we're having a war on fake news. And after Donald Trump won election, they put on a campaign that said, hey, we're doing a war on fake news and we're going to introduce these fact checkers. And so starting early 2017, just after Trump got into power, Facebook started to have these mandatory fact checkers. Now, they weren't actually supporting Trump because they actually support the other side, but they sort of did this to make it sound like they were supporting Trump. They were at least supporting his war on fake news. But they weren't really, because Facebook were really looking after themselves in trying to stop being sued. So when they did that, it wasn't really with the best of intentions. That wasn't to support Trump. And in fact, in 2020, of course, they suppressed Trump's chance of success by not letting people share stuff about the Hunter Biden case. And of course, before that, they automated bans based on sharing fake news. It became very problematic based on the fact that some of these shares of fake news weren't fake news. And they had a very bad algorithm. It wasn't just an algorithm, it was people that were creating claims of fake news when they weren't fake news. They just wanted to get their money from Facebook. So it all became a bit of a corrupt system and a bad system. And if you look at it really, the reason behind it wasn't anything good. It was just Facebook knew that they shouldn't be having these tags on posts, but they felt compelled to do it because of these lawsuits. They knew they shouldn't. They knew that people wouldn't accept it, but they wanted to do it to save themselves some money and to look good. So it was a business decision rather than an ethical decision. In fact, this was a very unethical decision by Facebook to put fact checkers in there. And when they did that, of course, they paid them. And there were existing fact checking groups such as Snopes. And they got money. It's great, they got to keep working. Instead of relying on donations, they were relying on Facebook. But then these other groups started up. And some of these, or perhaps more of them, maybe all of them, a lot of them, they were competing with each other. And so they put in the sort of thing that Facebook would want to hear, not necessarily the sort of thing that was correct. And I saw increasingly they were wrong. They were more and more wrong as time went on, and they were wrong in a particular direction. So if there was something that was said was on the left side of politics and was completely wrong, it would be fine. They wouldn't fact check that. If it was something on the right side of politics that was completely wrong, they'd fact check it. But even if it wasn't completely wrong, oh well, you're on the right side of politics, you're going to go down. And yeah, it became very political biased, and that became a big problem. And the fact checkers themselves, I believe they were involved in lawsuits as well more recently, and people were saying, well, actually the fact checking is now causing deaths. And I don't think it's actually caused deaths, but I think it's causing harm. So he's now put that in mind. Now a lot of people say, hey, is this sucking up to Trump? And I'll say, no, don't be stupid. Firstly, Zuckerberg is not on the right side of politics. He's definitely a leftist. And he doesn't like Trump, he hates him. He's done a lot of things against Trump. And why would he be afraid of Trump? He actively went against Trump in his first term, quite deliberately and quite maliciously. Why would he be afraid of Trump now if he wasn't afraid of Trump last time? That doesn't make any sense. So the idea that this is sucking up to Trump is nonsense. It's not sucking up to Elon Musk. I think it's just because he knows that this is the right thing to do, and that keeping up with the fact checkers is wrong. Now, I actually think that having community notes is wrong too, because I think we should go back to the old system where there's no tags. But community notes is at least not automated. It's by regular people who aren't paid, who are volunteers, which is similar to the old system, except for with a tag. The old system, before 2016, everybody who did that sort of thing were volunteers. Of course, they get their money from donations and all that, but they're essentially volunteers who got paid the same, which is nothing, either way. So they just tried to be truthful. And now it's volunteers who, well, the X one, they're on Twitter, and they're volunteers on Twitter, they're people on Twitter. So I still think they get it wrong, but at least it's not politically biased to be wrong, which is better. And look, there were cases obviously where fact checkers got it wrong sometimes. But I mean, I hilariously saw a number of cases where in the last couple of years they'd posted something and it had an automated fact check on it, and the fact check proved that the post was correct, that it didn't need to be fact checked. It was proven in the fact check itself, and yet it still stayed there and people were still banned over it. That's wrong. And I think this is where we get into big problems. And this is where it needs to be a personal touch. Bans should never be automatic. They should always be personal. And fact checking should always be personal. And it should be up to the individual. If I want to lie to myself, I should be allowed to lie to myself. If I want to believe lies, let me believe lies. And that's where the problem comes. I also think it's wrong to ever fact check any political, anyone that's voted in to politics in any way. Because I think it just causes a lot of problems. So I think you can talk about it, but you shouldn't put a tag on